to the entertainment Talking Sports.
What is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video. And in this video, I'm going to talk about the news that came out of the mouth of Dave Gettleman regarding Leonard Williams. Of course, Dave Gettleman made to put it lightly, a very questionable trade right around the trade deadline this year when he brought in Leonard Williams for a third-round pick in this year's draft, which equates to be a very early third-round pick, and a fifth-round pick if they do not retain him, which will turn into a fourth in the 2021 draft. So Dave Gettleman kind of put himself in a situation where he had no leverage and he was forced to bring this guy back, or at least that's how it is going to be perceived. Whether or not he does it will remain to be seen. But of course, Dave Gettleman, being that is one of the biggest topics this offseason, especially before free agency hits, was asked about Leonard Williams today, and he was asked specifically about the franchise tag and transition tag, and Dave Gettleman gave a definitive answer there, and we'll get into the answer in a second. And in my opinion, I don't think it's the best idea to give this guy a franchise tag or a transition tag. You're still going to be paying $14 or $15 million a year on a one-year deal. It's going to cause a lot of tension, but that may be the better option as opposed to giving him a 4 or 5 year contract. But Dave Gettleman put himself in this spot. And it was a silly trade to begin with. He should have never made it. Williams would have been available on the open market no matter what anyway. The Jets, I don't think, had any interest in bringing him back. But here's where we are, and Gettleman and the New York Giants will have to figure it out. But Leonard Williams seems as if he's willing to play hardball from some of the quotes that came out of Ralph Vacchiano that I will get into in this video. Of course, when you have a player like Leonard Williams, it is kind of up for debate whether or not he should be qualified as a defensive tackle or a defensive end. Defensive tackles make significantly less, and I will get into the figures when using the franchise tag and transition tag. And of course, Leonard Williams, who plays some time at the defensive end, will try to fight that and get as much money as he can. So you will not have a happy player on your hand, and who knows if he will hold out. Reportedly, he did go to Dave Gettleman this week off the mouth of Dave Gettleman and said that he wants to remain a New York Giant, but we'll have to wait and see how it all plays out. But let's jump into some of the quotes regarding this situation, and we'll start with this. This off the mouth of Ralph Vacchiano. Asked if the Giants have discussed using the franchise tag or transition tag on pending free agent Leonard Williams, GM Dave Gettleman answered in the affirmative. We're discussing that, and I don't discuss negotiations anyhow, but that is in the discussion, Gettleman said Tuesday at the NFL Combine. Now, the transition tag and the franchise tag, the difference between the two, to break it down as quickly and as simply as I can, the transition tag is rarely used. Usually when a team uses a tag, it is the franchise tag because it gives other teams the ability to try to sign that player. But the transition tag is about $2 or $3 million cheaper, and we'll get into the exact figures in a second, than the franchise tag. The franchise tag, though, guarantees that you will be able to keep that player. A lot of Giants fans feel like if there is going to be a tag, the transition tag would make a lot more sense, but obviously that will be up to Dave Gettleman and how much he's willing to chew into the cap. This is the next thing that was brought up. Still, while the Giants could tag Williams or extend him between now and the start of free agency, Gettleman, who surrendered a 2020 third-round pick and a 2021 fifth-round pick to trade for Williams during the 2019 season, seemed open to the idea of letting him walk and the fallout that could result from it. When he was asked about it, he said, I'll get killed, asking about whether or not he would let him walk, but I've got thick rhino hide. Now, I still think, in my opinion, that Gettleman is going to be forced to keep Leonard Williams. That's just my personal opinion. I could be wrong, though, and a lot of Giants fans would actually be happy if Dave Gettleman admitted to his mistake and moved on from this guy, in their opinion. I still like Leonard Williams. I still think he's a good player, and I think for the right price, I would want him back. But I don't think he's worth the price that he's going to command in terms of a franchise tag, and he would want a price similar to that, I think, if it was going to be a 4 or 5 year deal on a per year basis, or at least damn near close to it. I think you're talking at a bare minimum $13 or $14 million a year over a 4 year deal. I think that's the bare minimum, and Gettleman may be trying to deal from a position of power and try to display that he may have some leverage, and basically telling the media today that he says, listen, in so many words, without saying it in that quote, he's basically saying, I know I'd get killed by the media, but if the deal doesn't make sense, I'm willing to let him walk. And he would get absolutely destroyed by myself and by many other people. And that's the pressure that he put on himself when he gave up the picks that he did. It's really a no-win situation for Gettleman right now, because if he signs him, it's going to be for too much money. And if he doesn't sign him, he's going to look like an absolute fool. But he put himself in this spot. Next thing we're going to pull up is this. And this was Ralph Vacchiano talking about, and this just came out on SNY a little while ago, talking about the pressure that Leonard Williams will put on the New York Giants if, in fact, Gettleman tries to franchise or transition tag him. Dave Gettleman admitted the Giants are discussing the possibility of using either the franchise or the transition tag on Leonard Williams. If they do, they also better be bracing for a fight. If the Giants do use the tag on Williams, they are expected to tag him as a defensive tackle. And if they do, Williams' camp will likely file a grievance claiming he should be tagged as a defensive end, according to an NFL source. So like I always say, Vacchiano is one of the guys in terms of the inner Giant circle that I do trust more than most. So he has a source that's telling him if they do try to tag him as a DT, they will file to be a D end. And that only makes sense. You want to get the most you possibly can for your client. Williams played both positions with the Giants and the Jets last season, but being tagged as an end could earn him approximately $4 million more. Gettleman declined whether he was discussing tagging Williams as a defensive tackle or a defensive end when he was asked by SNY at the NFL Scouting Combine on Tuesday. And when asked if it was expecting a fight if he tagged Williams as a defensive tackle, Gettleman said, "I'll leave that alone." And then finally, these are the figures that would be, the discrepancy between being a DT and a DN when being tagged. It's understandable why Williams would fight for the extra money, though especially since he'd rather have a more lucrative long-term contract than a one-year tag. As a defensive tackle, Williams would be projected to earn about $13.7 under the transition tag, which teams would have the ability to try to, obviously try to exceed that and bring him on their football team. Now, there may be some draft picks involved. I don't know. I've heard conflicting reports when it comes to that of what they'd have to give up, or they would just have the ability to match the salary or pay him more if they're willing to give him more than 1 year. And 13.7, I think you're playing with fire there. I think a team could certainly do that. If you gave him the 15.5, you'd be making Leonard Williams more happy. You'd be paying him more than his market value, and no team would be able to sweep in. So if they're going to go with a tag at the DT position, I would think it would be the franchise tag and not the transition tag, but I could be wrong. Which is 15.5 according to the franchise tag. But as a defensive end, those numbers would jump to 16.3 for the transition tag and 19.3 if he was franchised as a defensive end. And that's just insane. Gettleman was also asked about other defensive ends as potential free agents, and he said for the most part he feels like they will all be franchise tagged in terms of the top-tier guys. Now, that does not rule out the possibility of a tag and trade. As I've discussed before, the Ravens have talked about that with Matthew Judon, and a number of other teams. We'll see it, with Unique and everybody else. There certainly could be tag and trade situations, and I suspect there probably will be for teams that are not looking to keep these guys at that price tag. But Leonard Williams for $19.3 million, if Dave Gettleman ever gave him that money, he should just quit on the job. And I personally do not really worry about that. He may fight that. If the Giants decide to tag him, I think it will be as a defensive tackle, because later in the article it went into detail about the amount of snaps that he had received as both a defensive tackle and a defensive end, and it was about double as a defensive tackle. And the fact that the guy doesn't get sacks, I don't think he has a leg to stand on. I think he's more of a defensive tackle. I think he'll obviously try to get as much money as he can, as he should, as any of us would in that situation. And you can't blame Leonard Williams. Leonard Williams was not the guy that, he didn't ask to be traded to the Giants. The Giants went in and they grabbed him knowing he was going to be a free agent this year. Do I think the tag is the wise decision? Personally, no. But it may not be the wisest decision to sign him either. If the price is right, signing him makes a lot of sense. If it's $12 or $13 million a year at this point, I'm willing to bite the bullet on a 4-year deal. But I don't want to be giving this guy $15 or $16 million a year. I just don't think he's worth it. I think there's guys on this roster that could do what he does. I think Dexter Lawrence, Dalvin Tomlinson, yes, it would be great to have a rotation, and he would be a great defensive lineman with this New York Giants franchise. He's young. He'd grow with the team. But for that price tag, I think you can get other players out on the free agency market for that price tag. Maybe not even at that position, but at other positions that could fill your needs just as much. I really don't want to tag this guy. I want to try to get a deal done for a 4-year deal, but in the proper price range, which is what he deserves. He doesn't deserve $15 or $16 million, but it doesn't matter. Gettleman put himself in this spot. The pressure is on Gettleman now, and he's going to look like a fool either way, in my opinion. The question is, what does he prefer at this point? Because if he signs him to a $15 or $16 million contract for 4 or 5 years, he's going to look like a fool. The guy had a half a sack last year. And yeah, he's good at collapsing the pocket and getting pressure on the quarterback, and I'm sure he'd perform better with more talent around him, which hopefully the New York Giants have on the roster this year and better coaching. But Leonard Williams has not been a great pro for a number of years. He's a guy with great potential, but he hasn't earned the money that Dave Gettleman's going to end up paying him if he keeps him on the roster. And if he lets him walk, he gave away draft picks for nothing. So Dave Gettleman has really put himself in this spot. It's a no-win situation. He says he's going to look like a fool if he lets him walk. I personally think he's going to look like a fool if he signs him. Because what I think he's projected to make on the open market if they do sign up to a 4-year deal. He's going to look like a fool. He's not worth $15 or $16 million. He's just not. And he's definitely not worth being franchised for $19 million if he classified as a defensive end. Maybe they're able to transition, take him at 13.7. I think that's the best possible solution to all this. But then he's just going to fight it. You know he's going to fight it. He will not be happy going into camp knowing that, he could have made, almost $16 million with the franchise tag. But we'll have to wait and see how it all plays out. Leonard Williams and the New York Giants certainly do not seem to be a match made in heaven, at least at this point in time. As always, guys, if you liked what you watched, please subscribe, drop a comment, maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.